give me one shot here on a blue chip stock, believe me, Kevin, the only problem you're gonna have is that you didn't buy more.
Nobody knows if the stock is going to go up, down, sideways, or in circles.
What's going on, NBA draft fans? Your boys are back. The Wolves of Ball Street, your favorite draft analyst. This is the NBA Draft Show on the No Ceilings NBA podcast feed. My name is Corey Tullivan, and I'm here, as always, with my co-host, Albert Garbage Time. Again, Albert, what's going on, my man?
We are living the dream. All is amazing. Corey, I think today's episode should be a pretty interesting one for us. I feel like we're almost going to be like, not switching roles per se, but it's almost like you're going to be coming on to be the guest. Going to be getting some on the ground insight from you, trying to find out what you were able to see and experience and feel while you were out on the incredible floors of Madison Square Garden. This morning, Corey, I was just thinking about the experience you had, and then realizing I, as a Knicks fan all my life, I haven't been to MSG in like 6 years. And it's depressing. Obviously, living on the West Coast now is the reason why. But I'm very jealous of the experience that you had, but also really excited to hear about what you saw and experienced, and also like what you ate and all kinds of stuff. So,
Well, to be fair, I did not go to MSG. I was at Barclay.
Oh, I thought you were at MSG this whole time.
No. I was at the Barclay. So I went to the Barclay Center on Friday, met up with our own Nathan Grubel of No Ceilings Draft Deeper Youth Movement fame for the Legends Classic. And then on Wednesday, I was at Stony Brook University to see Yale.
Seawolves.
Yeah, I went Seawolves. Almost a tourney team last year, an overtime away. But yeah, I was in Brooklyn at the Barclay Center. I did have, to be completely honest, probably the best chicken fingers in the arena that I have had in I'm not even sure how long. They took probably 7 minutes for me to get them after I paid. It was Nathan and I were like, what is going on in the back? Like, we're literally the only person, like the only people here. And but they were gigantic. They were delicious. The fries were great. The dipping sauces, excellent. The one thing I got to say, Barclay Center food, pretty legit. They've been stepping their game up food wise. They got Nana's Taqueria in there, which is like a place that absolutely blew up. Like, it started out as like a little hole in the wall bodega, and now it's like they've got multiple locations. They opened one in Barclay, like unbelievable tacos. But yeah, really good time. Saw a lot of basketball.
Really quickly, your favorite dipping sauce for a chicken finger?
I think Chick-fil-A sauce.
Oh, okay. That's a good one. I like honey mustard.
Yeah,
I
similar.
love ketchup.
Similar.
Yeah, exactly.
Similar.
Yeah.
This dipping sauce was like it was a barbecue sauce, but it had like a
Kick to it?
Like a real kick to it.
Damn.
And it would be up there in my like top dipping sauce tiers. They were great. And for the the price that you got to pay, they better be. Usually they're not. So the fact that they were so enjoyable, I was like, wow, what a great experience I had here. But not quite as enjoyable as the basketball I did get to watch.
Beautiful. And Corey, just really quickly, just like, so wow, this whole time I thought you were at MSG, so that actually makes me feel better that you were at Barclays. But I'm also really glad you got to see Nathan. Really excited to hear about that experience, but more importantly, you guys watched a lot of good basketball, so really excited to hear about it all.
Yeah, it was really good to see Nathan. I haven't seen him in person in over a year. And it's always cool, I think, to scout games, with another person, so you can bounce stuff off of that person, whoever you're watching with. I mean, I love going solo and just soaking games in and being fully focused, but it's always good just to have, other eyes, different perspectives. So Nate and I chopped it up, got deep into the weeds on guys, met up with some people around the league as well, trying to get, some rumblings, how they're feeling about this class, and the people at the top, and just down the line. So it was a valuable time getting to watch Syracuse, Texas Tech, Texas, and St. Joseph's, who has a lot of talented guys on that team. There was a lot of talent, maybe not outside of Trey Johnson, the tippy top tier of talent, but really good opportunity to see those guys all in one, doubleheader, which I love, getting to see a bunch of guys all in one night. And then going to see Yale, who I think has a couple of guys who are going to get a cup of coffee and one guy who I actually quite like. So it was a really good week of live scouting for me.
Corey, before we actually get into the players that you watch and all that stuff, something that I like to think about, like process and like the macro view of things whenever I go anywhere. And so like thinking about scouting, right? And, me, you, Rucker, Metcalf, we've been connecting yearly at the Nike Hoop Summit. And then, individually we go out and we scout on our own too. But what are some things that you as a scout feel like you care about when it comes to the in-person experience that some of our listeners might not be aware of or thinking about like actually observing? So to give you an example, Corey, like for me, something that I care a lot about and people have given me crap about it on the internet, like when I write about it, is I like watching the players interact with their teammates and their coaches and like the staff and like how they greet people. So like whenever I go to scout UCLA games, I always go like 2 hours early. And I'm literally on the floor as the players are walking in on street clothes. I don't know, they're coming after class or whatever. And as they're walking in, you see them interacting with like the security guards. You see them interacting with like, obviously the basketball staff, media people. Like you see those interactions. And I think that those interactions actually mean more than people may realize. That's how I felt about a guy like Adem Bona last year, where I had like real questions about his game, but his personality and his like people skills were excellent. Like every time I saw him walk in to Pauley Pavilion, he's walking over, spending time with security staff, spending time with, the coaches, greeting people, big smile on his face, like really outgoing. So that's something that I care about. So Cor, wanted to ask you, for you, when you go scout in person, what are some things that you notice or you like to pay attention to that maybe other people might overlook?
I look for that stuff too, for sure. Especially like, when they're like around their team, and team activities, if guys are huddling up, is that player like going to be a part of the group, or are they off doing their own thing? Like, I think, obviously team chemistry matters, and being a part of that and being somebody who is on the same page as everybody. I do think that kind of stuff is important. One of the things we noticed when we were at the Hoop Summit, when we were talking about Ace Bailey, was that like how vocal he was, how engaged he was, how locked in he was. So, even if maybe he didn't have a great showing in the game necessarily, we were like, okay, but we saw all of these things in practice that were great. And then we saw all of the intangibles that we like. And I think that stuff manifests itself like defensively when you can be really engaged and you're an active talker. And, listening to the Game Theory podcast, Sam and Bryce, we're talking about Ace, and Bryce mentioned that he was watching one of Rutgers games and that Ace wasn't playing in, and Ace was on the bench, like calling stuff out and still being involved in the game actively defensively when Rutgers wasn't on his side of the floor. And I was like, yeah, that checks out. Like we saw that in person, that level of engagement. I saw it again when I went to the Rutgers team practice behind the scenes, how vocal he was. I do think that stuff matters. And then obviously like skill, talent, all that stuff, can trump, any kind of, intangible thing that we might see from that perspective. But at the end of the day, when you can marry the two with the talent and the intangibles, I think, it gives you like a reason to believe in this players want to get better. It makes you believe that, okay, this guy's going to be easy to fit into a specific roster, maybe because he's going to be able to, integrate himself into the chemistry that a team might already have because of his personality. I think it's valuable. It's not the end all be all. It might not ultimately mean much for some prospects necessarily, but I do think in certain cases it's important. And like, it's certainly not a negative when a guy is like really into the game. Now, conversely, if you see somebody who's maybe not super engaged with some of that stuff, it doesn't mean that they're going to fail necessarily, right? Like you can't look at them and be like, oh, they stink. Even though they're shooting 45% from three, but they didn't high five their teammate. But like, if all of a sudden, a couple of years down the line, it's like, oh yeah, he's not a great teammate and there's chemistry issues and like he's a part of it. It's also like, all right, well, you're not necessarily going to be surprised by it. So I think that's important. I think for me in person, one of the things I really look at, I think you can really tell about like a person's frame in person and like really see like, are they actively like really as skinny as they look on TV? Right. Do you think they're going to be able to handle that physicality, or like, are they just like a beast? Like one of the guys I saw, Donnie Freeman from Syracuse, we'll talk about his game and what I saw, but like from a frame perspective, I was like, oh, he's got big, broad shoulders. Like he looks like he's got like this Tatum build that, I think is going to intrigue a lot of NBA front offices. I was really impressed by his frame. Christian Anderson, for Texas Tech looked a little bit like he looked like his listed height in person, where maybe you could watch and be like, oh, he's probably like 6 foot, when if he's listed at 6'2", like he might actually be 6'2". Like he looked like he could actually be that height, and he looked long. I think those things you can see up close in a way that you don't always get to see. Now, obviously I don't have a measuring tape with me going like, spread your arms out or like, but Rasheer Fleming, that dude, I saw him up close and I was like, NBA player, like first round pick, like easy, like, the skills were, but just from a length frame perspective, like, wow. So yeah, I think that's like the main thing I look for. And then definitely some of the intangibles. And then you could hear guys talk on the court, like where you might not be able to, you could see, all the little details, that you don't get on TV when you're there in person. So those, I think it's also different for each player, you might be looking for one thing and maybe you find something else. But yeah, those are the kind of things I look for.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. The last point you made, Corey, about like you looking for one thing and you finding something else. Like I remember last year when I saw Cody Williams in person, like I think there were some concerns that like he might be like on the quieter side. Like, we didn't know how he was fitting in and stuff like that. And then when I saw him in person, like, oh, he was like really getting along with his teammates, and that's where people gave me crap on the internet. Like, oh, you like this kid because he gets along with his teammates. And I was like, yeah, I actually do. Like, I actually think that's important. And maybe if you were out there on the floor with the players, you would feel that it actually means something. Last thing for me, Corey, like I just feel like, yeah, I also like watching what the guys are working on before the games.
Yeah,
to give you an
totally.
example, dude, like last year, Adai Mara like was really frustrating for me because he was like getting out on the floor early, but then it kind of just like everything he was doing felt really nonchalant. And like he was working on shots that he would never take in the game. Like he was taking hook shots from half court. And I was like, I feel like with this time you could do more. And he was doing like a lot of that type of stuff. And then like hook shots from the corner for threes. And I was like, oh, like in this time, if you did something more productive here, maybe I would feel better about your outlook as a prospect. Vice versa. Then I saw like someone like Kwame Evans Jr., right? And maybe he's not having like the start to the season that maybe he's wanted. But like when I saw him at that time, he was working like on pick and pop threes, and like the coaching staff was really on him, and they would put him in the post and they were like really banging with him and like having him like, really take the contact and work through it and stuff. And I was like, oh, I like that he's working on stuff. And it's not just stuff that he'll use in the game, but potentially he could be doing a lot of in the NBA, right? It wasn't just like doing random stuff on his own. So I think that stuff is important too. Like what there were the old Patrick Ewing meme, right? Of like, when did you work on that shot? That thing.
Well, a day was apparently.
Yeah.
No, that's true. That is important. I think that's the difference between like having like a pro mentality and being a kid. Like they are kids, like they're young kids, and not all of them understand what it's like to work like a pro necessarily all the time, right? And like all these reps, I think can be important and valuable, especially on game day. I think having a level of focus is important. Sometimes, you can mess around or whatever and keep it light, and maybe that's what keeps you calm. But like at the end of the day, like being really intentional about what you're working on, I think is important. And it helps prepare you for that moment where it's like, all right, well, I got the ball on the block here, and I've been spending, the last 5 minutes shooting hook shots from half court, and now I'm not like in the rhythm of just like instinctually getting to a move because I wasn't working on it necessarily. But it's hard for a lot of these young guys, I think, to strictly focus on what's going to like not only make them better as pros, but like what's going to help them succeed in the game. It's a mentality that, you know, I think some guys just have naturally, some guys have to learn. And as you mature, I think, you know, that probably just works itself out a lot of times. And then with other guys, it probably doesn't. And, you know, you see guys who are working on stuff. I mean, how many Mitchell Robinson summer workouts do we have to see where he's just cooking like guys in the gym who look like me and you, and he's shooting threes? And like, obviously if you're playing pick, it's all fun and game, but it's like, don't try to act like, hey, like I'm going to add this to my bag. It's like, no, you're not. Like, be intentional. And I remember JJ Redick on his podcast saying that he was really intentional. I was like, I think he said it was like a turning point in his career when he realized like, oh, I don't have to work on, you know, combo move bag work when I'm going to be running off screens and, you know, doing all of the role player things. And when he started really working on that stuff is when he really started to like turn his career around and succeed, because he was a guy who was like, now the way that the NBA operates where like they're giving guys like 2 years, like JJ could have been out of the league if he played now and had his first couple of seasons that he had. Right. So like, the leash is shorter now for a lot of guys too. So being intentional and working on stuff that's going to get you on the floor and you're going to like being ready for that, I think, you know, is really important. But for college guys also, it's like, you've been told you're the best thing ever for years and years and years. And like, you're the best guy on the team. So you get to do all this stuff until it all evens out. And all of a sudden you have to deal with the physicality and the size and effort of these guys who are on the same level of you. They just grew up in a different place. And now that's a rough transition. And, you know, I think some of the guys that I saw, it was clear they experienced that. So like, I don't think that there's, you know, like it's invaluable to notice that kind of stuff when you are, you know, going and showing up before a game or watching guys in person. And you look at the success of Jared McCain, man. Like, this is a guy who, we talked about his charisma and everything, but he's very intentional on who he is, and he knows who he is in, you know, on the court, off the court. He knows who he is, what he's good at, and it's helped him get on the floor. And that ultimately helped you expand your game. Because once you get on the floor and you do that stuff, if you keep working, you have more freedom, more leash to, you know, try some of the stuff that maybe you had in your bag that you didn't have an opportunity to necessarily show because you're playing a role. So I do think that's important.
100%, Corey, and very secure in who he is as well. I mean,
yeah, of course.
I remember he went super viral on TikTok because he was doing the nail polish stuff, and then he shouted out a brand, and then that brand ended up sponsoring him. And so, you know, like being really secure and intentional. I think all those things are important. And then, Corey, the point that you made about JJ, right? And you see that video that went viral last week of Dalton Connect. Like, I think it was after practice, he went up to JJ and was like, "Oh, can I get your pregame shooting routine?" Right? And like that speaks to like,
I missed that. I didn't even see it.
Oh yeah, it speaks to Dalton's maturity and his self-awareness, and him realizing like, I'm in a great position with a coach who really fought his way to, you know, earn his keep in the league, and now I've got an opportunity to do the same and earn the respect of guys like LeBron and AD and all that stuff. So he's like, let me learn from this guy and learn his routine and all that sort of beautiful stuff. But okay, Corey, wanted to kind of get into some of the stuff that you actually saw in person. I really enjoyed that conversation, but I actually wanted to start with Yale because Corey, with Yale, we've got a guy. I'm going to try my best. John Poulakidas. Did I get that right?
I believe it's Poulakidas. Yeah.
Okay. Poulakidas, right? Greek American guy, 6'6", senior for Yale. But even outside of him, I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on the overall experience of watching Yale, because I wanted to start here, Corey, because when you brought him up in our group chat, I was so excited because I was watching the Yale Purdue game a couple weeks ago live. And I was like, who the hell is this guy? Like, why is he so good? And for me, Corey, aesthetically, I was like, why does he look like Dalton Connect? Like just his body frame and the way that he moved, I was like, this looks a lot like Dalton Connect, but lefty. But obviously, you know, the stroke looks different and all that stuff. But like his like physique and the way that he looks from like his arms and like his torso to leg ratio and stuff, I was like, this reminds me a lot of Dalton Connect, the way that he looks, but obviously different players. But wanted to kind of get your thoughts on him and the overall experience you had there watching Yale.
He looked very long. Now, this is actually the second time that I've seen Yale live in the last 2 years. I saw them last year play Harvard, and he had a big game against Harvard as well. So I've seen him have two really good games. I think he started like 6 for 6 against Stony Brook or something. But he hung 23 on Purdue. So like you think of Ivy League, right? You're like, all right, well, what competition are they playing? Hung 23 on Purdue, and then you might know him from last year from his 28-point performance against Auburn when they upset Auburn in the tournament. So this is a guy who, it's not as if he is incapable of having these performances against real competition. He also got invited to the Jason Tatum camp in the offseason. So this is a guy who is like, it's not like he's off the radar completely. Like I had somebody from a team to like call him Ivy League Luke Kennard, and like I think that's like an incredible comparison for him because he's a lefty, and he's just a lights out shooter. He has over 400 3-point attempts in his college career, and he's like 41% over the span of his career. He's just a really smart player who knows who he is, has a really defined role. Obviously, this year it's expanding as a scorer a little bit. He's averaging 21 points a game. I don't think he's turned the ball over in like 8 games or something, like something ridiculous. He doesn't turn the ball over. He's a pretty good passer. He's not somebody who's going to like dice teams up with the ball in his hands, and that's not really his role. He does a lot of like movement stuff, spacing the floor off the ball, being ready to shoot. He's not put in like a bunch of ball screens. He can create his own shot, and he's got like a little bit of a bag, and he's comfortable like shooting with a hand in his face. He's got sidestep, step backs, all that. But like as a passer, he's just making like smart passes. He's going to hit the pocket pass. He might hit over the top. He's not going to like throw the weak side skip right now. Like that's not in his game. He's not dynamic in that way, but that's not his role. Bez Mbeng handles the ball and handles a lot of the playmaking for Yale, who I like a lot too. He's a defender. I think his offensive game is pretty limited. I think he's probably more like a guy who's going to bounce around, spend time in the G League or play overseas. But like Poulakidas is a guy that I think people are going to talk about at some point this year because he is a really, really efficient scorer who has an absolute strap, and he has good size and good length, and he's shown capable of like playing against good teams and scoring. Like some of the shots he hit in the Purdue game, like nasty at the end of the game. Like it's not like Purdue beat them handedly. Like they took them down to the wire to win that game. But some of the other things you talk about, how you started this conversation about like some of the intangible stuff. Yep. This is a kid when he was on the bench, because they beat the brakes off Stony Brook. Who again, like, they're a competitive team here and there. I think they recruit well, but like Yale was definitely favored and by a lot. And he's on the bench after, going 6 for 6 or whatever in the first half. And Yale scores, they call time. Stony Brook calls a timeout. He's the first guy up off the bench to go hype up his teammates, for the play on the floor. Like, so good teammate, efficient offensive player, like is not going to need the ball in his hands, is going to be able to space the floor. Look, I don't know if he gets drafted. I don't know if he gets invited to the elite camp or whatever, if he's more of a Portsmouth guy, but like, I think he could hoop. He's confident. I think he's good. And I think he's going to be a guy that people are going to talk about at some point.
Yeah, Corey, I think the biggest thing with him is like you mentioned, like he's really long. When you see him standing out on the perimeter, he's one of these guys where it really looks like his arms are like almost by his knees. Super, super long dude, but the shooting is unbelievable. I mean, this season is taking the most free throws of his career so far early on, 8 games in, and he's just decided to not miss any of them. He's at 96% on his free throws this year. Unbelievable. And Corey, we are big believers in free throw shooting, something that Phil Beckner, I believe, the shooting coach who was on the pod with Nate, he talked about, right? Free throws and shooting coach, by the way. Yeah, sorry. Free throws and floaters, right? Big part of, shooting projection. And we believe it. And Poulakidas here has really taken that to heart, and he's been lights out with his shooting, 20 points a game, as you mentioned, 21 points per game, as you mentioned, and just a guy that, like, when you watch him, the biggest thing with him that stuck out to me when I was watching the Purdue game, Corey, is like, if you just like, if they weren't wearing jerseys with names on them, like, you could just tell this guy belongs. Right.
Yeah.
Like a guy who's like, just like, it doesn't matter where he's playing or who he's playing for. Like, you just know that he belongs on the floor and is one of the absolute best players, right? Like, playing. So
Yeah.
I think with him, it was really, really special. Well, special is not too strong of a word, but just a guy that you could tell is a player. And he's listed as 6'6" by Yale. Did he look 6'6" to you?
I don't know if he's 6'6". You know, he might be 6'5" in shoes. But he's not tiny, is what I'll say. Like, he's got good enough size to be a 2. He's long, like we said. You know, he's definitely like in good shape. Like, he's got a solid frame. So he's definitely I'm not worried about his size at all. Now, you know, he's not like super bursty or athletic. He's not a guy who's gonna, like, you know, get a lot done at the rim. And I think that's, you know, if he was somebody who was also getting to the rim on top of the shooting, then I think that, you know, this would be like a real deal. Like, hey, you guys should know about him. He definitely has his shortcomings there. You know, like, he's not the quickest guy. He competes, you know, he uses his length. He'll take it in the chest defensively, but, like, do I think if, you know, he gets switched on Julius Randle, he's going to really have a chance right now? No, I don't. I think there are going to be some defensive issues for sure, but I do think that, you know, offensively, like, this is a guy who I just think, like, at some point he could find the right situation and find himself, like, coming off the bench and providing value for just what he can do on offense as a shooter and as a guy who doesn't make mistakes. Like, this is a guy who, you know, he had a positive assist to turnover ratio, I think at least the last few years of his career. You know, like, even if he's not like a big time playmaking guy, he's a guy that you can trust to not make mistakes. Like, he's averaging 0.3 turnovers this year. He's never averaged 1 turnover a game. He's always been under 1 turnover a game. So, like, he's a guy that you know is going to make the right decisions with the ball. He's going to score. He can get his own shot if you need him to bail you out with a grenade. And even, you know, for Yale, he's a guy who's going to create, like, when he gets the ball in his hands, out of, like, face-up opportunities. You know, he's got little go-to moves and side steps and step backs and stuff like that. He's comfortable. So, yeah, I'm a fan. I can't lie. I'm a fan. I've seen him a couple of times now. He's had, you know, and he's had great outings both times. But I think that he's having these great outings because he's good at basketball. You know, so I feel like he's probably coming into his game right now, and you know, it's going to be fun to watch him, you know, in some of the, you know, important matchups that he has remaining. You know, if he does play, you know, a team like Princeton or something, you know, like with Xavion and there's other prospects. You know, because last year when I saw him with Harvard, it was, you know, everybody's looking at Malik Mack, and, you know, he was the guy who, to me, really had popped coming out of that. And so, yeah, I think that this is, and I think Yale has a good chance to go, you know, make the tournament again and play on a national stage again, because I think Yale's a, you know, a really good team in the Ivy. But yeah, like, Yale is a good program, man. Like, you know, you talked about Danny Wolf. You know, Danny Wolf came from Yale last year. Like, again, you know, Bezin Bang is a guy who I think is like a good guard prospect. Again, you know, not going to get drafted. You know, he's probably, if he, you know, is an NBA guy at any point, it's because he really turned his shooting around, and, you know, he's on, like, he made it on like a 10-day or something. But you know, that team's not devoid of talent. I think he's going to get an opportunity again, potentially in the tournament, to again, you know, give himself an opportunity to shine.
Yeah. 100%, Corey. And even like the advanced numbers are looking good with him. BPM's up to 7.1 this year, PER 25.9. You know, obviously these aren't like the end all be all stats, but it's great. It's great to see him progressing, and it's really cool. And also another thing, Corey, that you said at the end about, you know, Bezin Bang, like, you know, us saying that, like, you know, someone might not be an NBA guy, that might be an overseas pro or a G League guy. Like, I think sometimes people take that the wrong way. Like, it's really hard to make the NBA. And there are a lot of people, you know, fighting for NBA spots. But the thing that is important, one of the main skills that NBA teams really care about, is shooting. Like look at my New York Knicks, man. They did all these weird shenanigans with the G League draft picks to go and get Matt Ryan and Landry Shamet so they can keep them involved in the roster. And those are two guys that are shooters, right? And the NBA, they really value that skill set. So a guy like Poulakidas, even if he has his limitations, like you discussed, Corey, and it's clear. Like I know I mentioned the Dalton Connect thing. That's just more like a physical appearance thing, like in terms of his frame. But Dalton Connect, obviously, a much better athlete, and the way that he was attacking the rim, he can get vertical and stuff like that was a huge difference for him, and the reason why he went where he went. But I can't agree with you more about it, Poulakidas, Corey. And as I mentioned before, Greek American guy. If you've ever been to a Greek Orthodox church before, Corey, it's crazy.
I have. I think I've told you my story about
the golden Bibles. There are insane. I remember like the one I went to, they had like a golden Bible, and everyone had to kiss it on their way out. But no.
Also, they do like Jesus soup for the Eucharist. Like everyone shares a spoon. I don't want to get into it. It's my wife's
no disrespect to the Greek Orthodox.
My
church,
wife,
but,
yeah.
I know, a very interesting world. But no, I did some research on Poulakidas, and like there are a bunch of like Greek American athlete like Instagram accounts that are like really excited about him as well. So we're wishing Poulakidas the best. But before we move on, Corey, anything else from the Yale experience for you?
No, the best part is that it was 15 minutes from my house.
Oh God, 80% of my friends from high school went to Stony Brook, so I get it.
Look, it's an incredible school. Like medical field, like
great school.
Yeah, great educational school, and a good definitely a solid basketball program.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Corey, I think it's time we get into the nitty gritty. We get into a little bit of the main event, what you saw at Barclays, and obviously, when we look at kind of the teams that you got to see there, and there's some big names. The biggest name was probably Trey Johnson.
Definitely.
And Corey, I really wanted to dig into Trey Johnson with you because he's a guy that we got to see at Nike Hoop Summit, a guy that I think all four of us walked away very impressed by. I think he showed different elements to his game that maybe we were not expecting. I thought he was a legitimate 6'5" when I saw him in person as well, especially standing next to him. He was like a little bit on the slender side, but in terms of his height, it's there. He was definitely 6'5" in my eyes, at least. But something I've been seeing a lot of on the internet, Corey, that I want to ask you about, and I want to kind of hear your perspective on, is there are some people out there. I'm not trying to take shots. I'm just trying to, kind of point out that there are people out there that are kind of comparing him to a Cam Thomas type of player, trying to project him as this almost like black hole score first type of guard. I just want to take a second to say, like, I've been really impressed by Cam Thomas this season. Corey, you and I were big fans of Cam Thomas, before the draft. And, like, obviously he had some bad tendencies with maybe his shot selection and the lack of passing stuff. But in my opinion, Corey, I think he's looked a lot better as a passer this season, especially on that Brooklyn Nets team and the way that he's competing. Obviously, they rely on him to score the ball a lot, but I don't think he's been the black hole that people make him out to be. And so in that, along that same vein, talking about Trey Johnson, at the Hoop Summit, I actually liked his passing. And so to kind of see this rhetoric out there that people are trying to make it seem like, Trey Johnson is like this black hole that's not going to pass the ball, is just going to look for his own shot. Wanted to kind of get your perspective, what you saw, what you were able to take away from seeing him in person again.
I mean, look, do I think he's a shoot first player? Yeah, I do. But like Cam Thomas was shoot first, second, and third. Like, I don't think Trey is that. Like you said, and when we saw him in person at Hoop Summit, like I was really impressed with some of the passing stuff that he displayed in the practices, where it was like, oh, this is a guy that can run ball screens. And I think that he showed that in high school too. I spoke to a team scout that was like head over heels for him. And because I think his potential as a shot creator, it's like, you get excited about those guys. And, to me, like he's got like that wiry, like SGA frame, but kind of like Terry Rozier's game a little bit, Yeah. And which I don't think is a bad thing. I think Terry Rozier is a good player at his best, and you just get like kind of like a wiry taller version of that. I think that is a good thing. He had a rough night. He had a rough tournament,
Right.
percentage wise. But like what I liked about it is that he hit really clutch free throws and he hit some big shots down the stretch the night that we went to see him. And so he has like this next shot mentality and confidence where like he is not going to waver if he misses a shot. He thinks that he's going to make the next one. And I think that's really important right now because, you know, for guys who are shooters, because that's what he is, you know, he can get to that second level and pull up and hit mid-range stuff, but he still does kind of struggle to get, you know, to the rim and be a guy who is getting a good amount of attempts there. And, you know, if he was a guy that was like a true 3-level scorer like that, I think, you know, he legitimately would be able to implant himself in that. Like, could he go 2 type conversation, you know, top 3, whatever. But I think that kind of hampers that for me right now. But like, he's got sick footwork. Like, he's comfortable, like hitting like turnaround middies out of like post ups. And the shot is, you know, it's pure. Now, he struggled so much that in warm-ups, when I was trying to get like my warm-up, you know, video that you slow-mo or whatever that you see on social, it probably took me like 5 minutes to get it. Like he wasn't hitting shots. And to me, sometimes I was like, you know what? He's probably just going to go off. He's getting all the misses out now. He's going to go off tonight. And he didn't. He struggled. But even still, like he hit a deep 3 from dead center off the catch. Like he's good. I think he's a good player who's got like a really solid floor because shooting is a skill at that size that translates. And he's not just a shooter. He's a guy who can really create his own shot. So, you know, I don't think I learned anything new about him seeing him in person. But I'm glad that I got to see one of his off nights to see how he was going to contribute, because even though the shooting percentage wasn't great, he did winning things at the end of the game and they felt confident going to him. So I thought that was good.
Yeah. I think, Corey, once again, like I almost feel like it's a blessing when you see one of these top prospects have an off night. Right. Because then it kind of gives you a floor in terms of expectation for them. Like you start to wonder like, oh, OK, if this is the worst version of a guy, I can live with that, because if it only gets better from here, then sign me up. Right. And I think that with Johnson, as you're mentioning, Corey, like I think with him, that confidence you're talking about, right, the next shot up type of thing, where he's not too worried about what he's shooting. He's not a guy that's like counting percentages and worried about, you know, that type of stuff. Like I think that makes him more appealing for teams, because at the end of the day, teams need offense, right? Like this is that's what the NBA has become, right? You need you need guys who can put the ball in the bucket. Obviously, defense is important. Defense still wins championships. Look at the Boston Celtics, obviously, but you still need guys who can do it, right, in terms of scoring. And so I get it with Johnson. I think it's good. And obviously, you know, for you, a guy that you're getting to see for a second time. So pretty great stuff. Yeah. But Corey, wanted to ask, other than Johnson in that game, anyone, you know, kind of sticking out to you a little bit?
I mean, I you know, I still kind of like Kaluma a little bit.
Okay.
His body looked incredible. The shooting is what it is. It's, you know, it's hit or miss. I think it looks good. I think for me, like just seeing it up close, I think he shoots with too much palm. You know, I think he needs to get it on his fingertips more. That way he can kind of control where the ball is, where it ends up, rather than, you know, I think guys who shoot with a little too much palm, to me, typically miss more inconsistently. But like he had, you know, a typical Kaluma game. You know, he was solid. He contributed. I think he's strong enough to like body up and defend. He's definitely going to get a cup of coffee. I like how he plays off too. He got guys on pump fakes a couple of times, you know, getting into the paint, just being patient. So, you know, I like that. I thought he was pretty good from the Texas side. From St. Joe's, they have a few guys that are interesting. X Brown, I think is a really fun guard. I think he's a little small.
Okay.
Right now he's struggling to like score efficiently, but he scored pretty I think he was pretty efficient last year, if I recall correctly. I think he's pretty dynamic. He definitely, like, he had a play where he tried, like, he got into the paint and he tried kind of going under the hoop. He was driving from the right wing and he was trying to, like, kind of block out the trailing defender with the rim. And he went up and kind of, like, threw up like a lefty layup that it just got sent. So, like, just because, like, you know, the size and athletic limitations, but, like, he's crafty. Really fun. I like the poise that he plays with. I don't expect him to, like, try to come out this year. I think, you know, St. Joseph's has built, like, a really good program, so I wouldn't be surprised if he stays there. But he could also be a guy who transfers up. I think after this year, because, you know, maybe Eric Reynolds is a guy who does try to test the waters, and then Rasheer Fleming is. I think he's out. I think he's going pro. I think he's a pro this year. I really liked what I saw from Fleming.
Okay.
Seeing him in person.
Talk to us about Fleming.
Seeing him in person, man, like, he just has an NBA body. Like, that. He has the body that you want from an NBA dude. He's strong. He's rock solid. He's long as hell. And, like, he moves well. You know, he's not the most fluid mover ever. You know, like, if he had, like, 10% more fluidity to his game, I think, like, we'd be like, this is a guy who's going to be going in the lottery. But, like, I think he looks the part of a top 25 pick. I think he looks the part of a top 25 pick. He had, like, a couple of drives that were really impressive. One from the left wing, he finished with, like, a extension with his left hand that I really liked. He had another drive from the right wing. He spun into, like, a lefty finish. He missed it, but then he, like, gobbled up, like, an offensive board with, like, a quick jump, finished the second chance opportunity. And then he had this drive in a similar spot coming from the right wing where he spun, got into the middle, and he, like, had this two-handed jump pass to the weak corner that I was like, oh, okay. Like, there's a little bit of vision and feel coming along as well now. Now, look, I think his handle is still a little bit loose. So, like, if a defender gets, you know, really into him, or if he tries to go too deep in his bag, I think he's prone to, like, leave the ball out in front for, like, strips and whatnot. But I think he has, like, some pretty interesting, like, ancillary role player type skills in the front court, and, like, he can defend multiple spots because he's strong enough to hold up physically, and then he's, like, mobile enough to guard on the perimeter a little bit. They use him in a multitude of ways. They put him in the middle on a 1-3-1. He had possessions on Trey Johnson. He had possessions on Kaluma. I thought he was really impressive. Like, I walked away where I was like, I knew that he was a guy that was, you know, there was a lot of hype behind. You know, obviously I was familiar with his game, watching, but I just felt like seeing him in person that, like, it clicked, and I was like, oh, okay, I have no more questions. Like, I get it. I know what he is, and this is a guy who I think is going to continue to get better. And this is a guy that I to me, like, yeah, if he just stays consistent and doing what he's doing, I think he's going to be a first round pick.
Corey, I have a question. So, a guy like Fleming, and in the game that he played when you were there, that's the game that he had 20 boards, right?
I was there Friday. I don't know what his final stat line was.
Let me look it up right now. Yeah.
That was against
16
Texas.
16 points, 20 rebounds.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
But Corey, like, just because I know after this we're going to talk a little bit about JT Toppin as well, but I think the 6'9" is one of the most interesting NBA prototypes because I think it goes either way, and I want to hear your thoughts on Toppin as well, because it's freaking hard, Corey. Like, it's a thing where if you're 6'9", right, like, legitimately 6'9", I feel like it's either or, right? Like, you either have to be able to guard up and down, or offensively, as you mentioned, some of those ancillary skills and, you know, skills in general. It's either you can guard up and down, or you can offensively play down. You get what I'm saying? Like, you need to be able to do either or. And I think Fleming is interesting because he's shooting it the best he's ever shot it in college so far this season. He's over 40%.
The shot looked good. Shot looked good.
Great to hear on the biggest volume of his career so far in college as well. And he's rebounding the hell out of the ball. But and then like I look at a guy like Toppin, and I'm like, okay, watching Toppin for me, I'm always kind of in that weird spot. I'm like, how is this going to translate on the next level? And then Corey, my brain even went as far as, remember last year down here in Downey, California, I spent a day with Martez Brown, right,
Mhm.
who is now with the Minnesota Timberwolves G League team. Similar size, right? 6'8", 6'9" ish guy, lefty, big, long, very athletic, but kind of like in between. And so kind of wanted to get your thoughts on both guys, Corey, in terms of how you're viewing their roles on the next level. Obviously, with Fleming, the fact that he can guard up and down, he's like way developed as an outside shooter now compared to, his first 2 years at St. Joe's, right? And just wondering now, then you take in Toppin, how do these guys kind of, how do you process guys like this? Because I feel like that's the hardest archetype in the NBA, 6'9", and like, how do you make that work type of situation?
Yeah, the game that I saw, Toppin struggled. I think he just came the game before he had 20 rebounds. I mean, that kind of stuff like is easy for him. He's like an effortless like leaper, second leaper. But to me, it's hard for him because even though he's like showing more of an effort to shoot,
Mhm.
and he's like a 5. Like he's like the 6'8", 6'9", 5. And right now, I don't think he's strong enough to really bang. And like that's one of the things that we saw against Syracuse is that like Lampkin is on the other end for Syracuse, and that's a big, strong dude. And Toppin struggled with him, and one of the, like hit in the half court. He's they're going into him in the post, and he kind of has to turn over the right shoulder and go up with the little lefty hook, and he just couldn't kind of own his space and kind of like back the Syracuse bigs down. And then like he doesn't really have counters. When he does counter and kind of use that right, it looks very mechanical. Now luckily I don't think that's going to be his role at the next level. I don't think he's going to have to worry about really perfecting that post stuff. I think he's got to continue to try to stretch the floor as much as he can, and just he's going to be a guy who's going to kind of be like a rim runner, pick and roll, lob threat, short roll. He's probably going to really work on that little lefty hook or lefty floater out of like the short roll to kind of be a counter to short roll pass. He did have a couple of short roll passes that I thought were nice. Like to me, he's got to be kind of like Brandon Clark, and like to me, he looked like a definite pro, but I don't know if he's going to be a starter in the league at any point. Yeah. And it's not to say he won't be valuable. And if he stretches the floor, it's a completely different conversation. Yeah. But like, he definitely needs to get stronger. He needs to be more physical. And right now, stylistically, he plays a lot like a 5. And I mean, look, if he ends up on a team where he's playing next to a stretch 5 who's like comfortable, then that could open things up and make things a lot more easier and how he could fit, right? But if he goes to a team where the 5 can't really stretch the floor as much, he's the type of guy that could muddy up an offense, I think, because he's not going to be able to do the things that he's doing in college if there's like, I don't know, Nikola Vucevic, who's like having a good year, but traditionally he shoots threes, not a great shooter, and now the floor is cramped or whatever. You put him next to Klingon or something. I don't know, like whatever the case is. I don't know how malleable and versatile he is in those scenarios. Where with Fleming, I think that he could fit a lot better next to really anybody because he can kind of stretch the floor a little bit. It's he's not a dead eye shooter, but he can bang and be strong and do big man stuff, but he can also kind of do some of the wing stuff. And so if you want him to kind of be like Patrick Williams, like he can be. If you want him to develop into something else, I think he can do that too. I just think there are more outcomes with a guy like Fleming versus Toppin, who I think is a little bit more constrained. But like speaking of like how confusing this kind of like archetype is for you, like then you have Donnie Freeman, who is like, I think more similar to the Fleming archetype, just like I walked away going, man, that kid's raw. And he did some good things. He's a guy that seeing it in person, I was like, dang, this kid's frame is sick. Like he's got big, broad shoulders. Like he looks like Tatum. I think his shot looked like it was pretty repeatable, especially in like off the catch. It's slow, but like pretty smooth, a little mechanical, whatever. But like, I think he's going to shoot it. But like, he's not a wing because he has no ball skills. Like he can straight line drive, but as soon as somebody cuts him off, he has no counters. He has to turn his back, and that's where he settles for these like fadeaway mid-range shots because he doesn't have a way to counter it. Like it's the only thing he can get to unless he moves off the ball. But like everything was like it wasn't that natural, just free flowing. He can't play 0.5. Like everything is just he has to think about it for a second. It literally looked like a kid who went from JV to varsity mid-season and is now trying to figure out a difference in the speed of the game. And I think with a guy like him, it's like, yeah, high recruit, all that, his tools really tantalizing. But like now he's not the most athletic guy on the floor, not the strong, the quickest, the most strongest, or whatever, the tallest. Like he's got guys who are actually, similar to him. From a physicality standpoint, and that's an adjustment for him. And I thought that was really, really apparent for me. There were definitely things that intrigued me. It would not shock me if he still ended up being a first-round pick in this draft based on some of the tools. But like, you look at him in high school, and I was pretty skeptical of him coming out of high school because of, again, his shot diet and stuff. And I just think the league is moving away from guys like that unless they're like super high feel. I think, skill and feel is really the name of the game now. But he also played next to a really good point guard who I think helped him get to his spot. And, like for me, he's going to be a guy that I think is, going to be on that border of we'll keep him towards the end of the first round because he's got a really good frame, good physical tools, and has shown some flashes. But like, would I rather get him at pick 33 and try to, have him on a more team friendly contract than guaranteed money? And then he's going to have to make a decision on like, well, do I want to get better and come back and work on my game and feel more comfortable with the speed of the game? Cause now I've done it for a year and I've adjusted. Or do I want to take the shot, get to the league as quick as I can? And now I'm, fighting for minutes and bouncing around. I'm in the G League, and he's one of those guys where it's like, that's where you get confused with that archetype. Cause it's like, what does he do? He's a pure 4. Like, I don't think he's not skilled enough to play the 3. He's not really strong, tall, long, or whatever to play the 5 full time. So he's just only a 4. And I think, I don't know what we need to come up with a fun word for it, but I think one position players are the new tweener. Back in the day, we used to, be like, oh, he's a tweener. He doesn't have a position. And that used to be a negative. Now I think if you have a defined position and that's all you can do, I think that's the new tweener, where it's like, ooh, he can only play one position. Unless it's like a guy who can anchor the floor as like a center. I get a little weary of one position guys.
Yeah, Corey, I think it's a really interesting time in the league. Like, I think when you were talking about Fleming and Toppin, you're like, oh, these guys are pros. I 100% agree, right? And we see pros in the NBA that are struggling with that, right? Or sorry, struggling is not the right word. It's they're in the league, but they're not stars. They're just kind of off the bench guys. Give an example. When the Knicks took Obi Toppin at 8, that was kind of my question always. I was like, oh, he's just a straight 4, and a guy who posted up a lot in college. Like, let's see what this becomes. But I don't really believe in the skill, like the wing skills ever coming in and him ever being a wing. He was a nightmare on defense, and he, with the Knicks, Tibbs really struggled with that part of his game. He couldn't protect the rim, wasn't a strong enough rebounder in the way that Tibbs likes. So Obi Toppin's a guy. Then you see a guy like Tamani Kamara for the Portland Trailblazers, what he offers as a bench guy. You look at guys like Oso Ighodaro, who is playing a ton for the Suns, and a guy who, can do a lot of different things for them. And, he showcased a lot in college too, playing with Golick and stuff like that. But these guys are all pros, right? They all play on NBA teams. They play big minutes, or they're rotational players, right? They get minutes. But yeah, like watching Toppin, watching Fleming, watching Freeman, I think they're all of the similar ilk where my biggest thing is I hope none of them go in the first round, right? Like, I think that'll put a really difficult pressure on them that might not be the best. I don't know. Is kind of where I'm thinking, because like you look at Iguodaro and where Tamani Kamara went, right? Obviously second round guys, and now the way that they're playing, these teams are like, oh, we found gems in the second round. Meanwhile, a guy like Toppin, who went number 8 in the draft, it's like he was a bust. But Toppin's playing well for Indiana. He's got a really clear, defined role for them, and he's obviously expanded the jumper to outside 3, and he's done a good job with that. But my biggest thing once again is that archetype that we're talking about, Corey, is really, really difficult to evaluate. And whether it's Fleming or Freeman or Toppin, I think it's really interesting that you got to see these 3 guys who are clearly, they're individuals and they have different skill sets, but also are kind of similar as well. And to see how this continues to evolve. And I think that's going to be their homework for all 3 guys. How are they going to be able to diversify their games more to maybe, obviously better solidify, I guess, their potential as NBA guys as well, is going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah. And all guys who are, at different arcs of their development, right? You get the sophomore, the freshman,
right,
the junior. And that's the thing. Like, not everybody has the patience to be like, all right, I'm going to go back for myself. Toppin could have went out last year. He would have got drafted.
Yeah.
Maybe even at the end of the first round if he came out.
Right.
Fleming, if he came out, maybe he gets drafted too, like in the second or whatever. But like, these are guys that are patient and we're like, I'm going to go back, develop my game a little bit and see what I can do. And I think it's worked out well for both of them. I'll be interested to see if Freeman takes that same kind of mentality. I got to say, I pretty weary anytime a guy goes to Syracuse from a draft perspective. Since Melo, I don't know. I don't think they've really had much success, with NBA guys. Maybe part of me is still a little bit upset that they left the Big East. I don't know. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how he develops the rest of the year. He's talented for sure.
Corey,
out of that group, I think I left the highest on Fleming.
Since Melo, who is the best pro to come out of Syracuse?
I don't know. It's a good question, right?
Yeah.
Is it Hakeem Warwick? That was the same year though, right?
Yeah.
Or was it?
It was the same year. Jeremy Grant?
Yeah, Jeremy Grant.
Has to be, right?
Yeah.
Even that took a while. Good God. Keon Anthony's going to be there next year. So.
Yeah. I've seen him. I've seen him. He's local. He's playing at Lou High. So he's a guy that, I
played with VJ.
got to see last year and I'll see again this year. But yeah, it's just, not a ton of guys come out of Syracuse. Deion Waiters, Michael Carter Williams,
Wesley Johnson,
Johnny Flynn.
Jesus.
It's a tough one.
It is. Oh, God.
Tyler Ennis. I mean, yeah, it hasn't been a ton of high level guys.
Yeah.
Since Melo.
Right.
Yeah. Buddy Boeheim. Judah.
Yeah. All right, Corey. I think from my notes, those were the main guys that I wanted to hit. But anybody else you wanted to hit on from who you saw in person?
Yeah, I like Christian Anderson from Texas Tech.
Yes.
I wrote about him right before the season started as a potential smaller guard who can kind of pop and maybe work his way onto the draft radar. I'm not 100% sure he's a guy who would come out this year. I think that he does have an NBA style game. And I think I'm really impressed by his poise, his decision making when guys sent 2 to the ball, how he was able to handle that. I think he's a real deal shooter, either off the catch or creating with the ball in his hand. And I like that he plays a mature, nuanced game. So I like him. And then the other guy for Texas Tech is Darian Williams. Who's 6'6", kind of guard forward, junior. He was impressive. He's having a really good year, 16, 5 and 5, 94% from the line, struggling with his shot a little bit this year. Shot 46% on 3 attempts last year, 36% on 3 attempts the year before. I'm sure he'll, turn that around a little bit, but he kind of reminded me a little bit of like Dave Roddy, how he, in college, where he would like use his size and his skill. Like he's got really light feet. He would kind of like feel a defender on a drive and then kind of like spin off of them. And because he's so strong and like smooth with good footwork, he was able to like kind of get to the rim whenever. He had a little like mid post game. He's a guy who I think is going to be a pro as well. I could see him getting drafted, or I could see him being like a guy who's a priority, like free agent, undrafted free agent. So, yeah, definitely. He definitely is a guy who I'm not like, you got to draft this guy in the first round, but like just watching him, you're like, oh, good basketball player, knows what he's doing on the floor, like smart passer, mixes it up, rebounds, strong. Even if he's a little undersized, he can probably guard up because he's strong.
Another guy early in the season just lights out from the free throw line, 94.4%.
Yeah, we like good free throw shooters.
We do. Maybe it's an obsession for us, but but yeah, Corey, like I think overall, and this is something that I think we talked about a couple years back, maybe 2 years ago, where nowadays, because of technology, because of all the different resources out there, I think sometimes in-person scouting has maybe lost some of its luster to people, right? Because you get everything on Synergy, you get everything on all these different websites, and you look at stats and numbers and all that stuff. But there's still a lot of value to scouting in person, guys. Like, it's something that we really believe in at No Ceilings. And we believe in the numbers as well. We believe in trends. We believe in all that stuff. But there's still something beautiful about seeing these players in person. There's still that money ball factor of, seeing these guys, seeing how they interact, seeing how they carry themselves, seeing, the things that they care about. All these things are still super valuable. And so, Corey, I'm really glad that, number one, you got to go out there and you got to spend that time with Nathan as well. I know Nathan's another big Christian Anderson fan, loves him a lot, right? So glad you got that experience. But yeah, Corey, anything else you got?
Yeah, I think the other thing is too, like, this is if you want to get into scouting, or if you have aspirations to either make it, scouting media, or you want to, get to the league, it's at a certain point, like being seen at events is, I think it's important, and it gives you an opportunity to, maybe even run into people who work within the league, and you get an opportunity to pick their brain and forge relationships. And this is a relationship business. So like, getting to forge those connections is great, and getting to let people know that you're a person that they could like being around, I think, is important too. So outside of just the basketball, I think, there's a lot of value in, just getting in and mixing it up with other people who are doing this professionally, and getting to hear their opinions and what they're seeing, and learning perspectives. Because, one of the things I think that I've learned the most talking to people within a team, and it's always really interesting to parse through what I hear, is like, sometimes when you're talking to these guys, you go, are they talking about this player in a like overall, like grand sense of their overall who they are? Or are they kind of thinking about this conversation from the perspective of how they're going to fit on their team? And like, sometimes, I'll catch myself in a conversation. I'll go, oh, they mean like, they'd be great for them, or like they don't like them because they don't fit the system. But just getting that opportunity to kind of pick their brain and realize, like, a lot of the scouting that these professional teams are doing, like, they're also trying to look for how they're going to fit their team specifically. And so when, like, our overall conversations, we might be like, oh, this guy's talent is enough to have him in the first round, and why would you take the older prospect over this younger guy, or why would you take this guy over that guy? This guy has so much more potential. When these guys are these teams are trying to do this job to be like, well, who's going to fit our culture, our offense, our defense, all of this other stuff, and that's why you might get a Dylan Jones who gets drafted at pick 25 or 26, whatever it was, in the first round in that draft, because you look at the guys that Presti likes and that organization likes, right? It's guys like Dylan who are long and strong and multi-tooled and this and that. And I think that those perspectives also can help kind of shape how I look and evaluate certain things.
Yeah, no, 100%, Corey. Like I think, and hey, if any of our viewers, listeners are in the LA area, I'm going to be at a ton of UCLA games this season. And if you ever want to connect and talk and chop it up and talk about these players in person, like I'm going to be there, and you can come and find me. Yeah, just tall Asian dude. Um, one of the only tall Asian dudes out there. So, yeah, come find us. And Corey, I'm right there with you. There's a beauty to all this. There's an importance to all this. And like you said, Corey, that you never know who you're going to run into, who you'll be next to, who you'll be able to talk to, and all of those things are of value. And so, I'm right there with you, man. It's been great.
Yeah, this is a fun episode, man. And a nice little, way to continue to transition into this season, as like we're still early in, still only 5-6 games in for a lot of teams, maybe even less. So we have to take everything with a grain of salt, look at the competition. But there's been a lot of good basketball, man. That the Auburn game last night, phenomenal. I mean, just still a lot of fun basketball to be had. And it's hard to do our like typical show where we like break down guys this early, because you want to take these games against Youngstown State Community College University and overly react one way or the other to certain things. But with that said, has there been anybody that kind of caught your eye early on this year, or somebody who you like that you've been watching, that you just have it's matched your impressions coming into the year, or anybody interesting?
So Corey, we have our roundtable piece coming out this week.
Yes.
NoCeilingNBA.com. I'm just gonna say it, like, and this is such a boring answer for a lot of people, but I'm just super happy with Dylan Harper. It's like he's been everything we could have asked for. Like everything we've been expecting. We loved him coming into the season, and he's been consistent. And what I wrote in for one of my answers for him was that, like, he's been, not only has he been good, he's been consistently good. And yeah, like they lost to Kennesaw State, but something I wrote in my thing was like, well, if you've got Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper and everyone else on the team is not so great, you're going to have games like that. If your team is top heavy, you're going to lose some games early on in the season that people are going to kind of raise their eyebrows at. But it's
especially when your top heavy pieces are young.
Exactly. Freshmen, right? It's bound to happen. And I think Dylan Harper still had a good game, and he's having a good season to start. I'm really happy with the consistency with him. The level of competition every single night from him has been great. The passing's been there. Like everything that we thought would translate has translated. Obviously, I'm sure, he would tell us that he wishes that he was shooting the ball better, but once again, early in the season, I'm not worried about that. I think he's a really good shooter. He's going to be just fine. And so it's a boring answer, Corey, but I've been really happy with Dylan Harper. And that's why I put him in there for one of my answers for the roundtable thing. Like, just, he's been consistently good. And he's been exactly, I think I put the Dennis Green quote, when he was like, they are who we thought they were, or whatever. And I was like, that's Dylan Harper. He's been exactly who we thought he was going to be. He's been really consistent. And I've been really happy with this play so far.
Yeah, 25-5 from a freshman is not bad.
Yeah,
not bad.
Really,
he's looked good. I'll be excited to catch him, in person. My annual trips out to Rutgers for sure, and see those guys. Interesting stat. And look, I know Ace is not a guy who's generating a ton of paint touches right now. Looked it up today, shooting 100% at the rim, which is pretty good. Not like a ton of attempts. So I think that'll probably go down a little bit. But for a guy like, all right, he might not be getting to the rim a lot, but when he gets there, he does finish. Is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. I think he's like 46%, 47% on triple jumpers, something like that. Like, Ace Bailey's good, guys. He's 6'10". He could score. Like, he's gonna figure it out. He'll be fine.
And sorry, really quickly, Corey, the thing that I think we need to, as a general public, have to kind of correct ourselves on, just because a guy is a 5-star guy doesn't mean he's a finished product. Like, correct. I think sometimes people lose sight of that. Sometimes they forget that they're 19-year-old, 20-year-old kids. Like, just because he's a 5-star, just because, on mock drafts, he's going 1 and 2, on big boards, he's 1 and 2, that does not mean that he's a finished product. These guys are still working on their games. That's why they're in college. They're not in the NBA. They don't have $30 million contracts. They're not given the ball every single night to go and lead an NBA team to wins. They're in college. Yes, they've been given these rankings, super high, 5-star, whatever, All-American, McDonald's All-American, all that stuff. But that doesn't mean they're finished. And so this discourse on Ace Bailey, the nitpicking of his game, has been extremely strange behavior, in my opinion, on the internet. He's a supremely talented, possibly 6'10" wing, who gives a shit about basketball, is a great teammate, super vocal. We've seen it all in the gym. I'm not worried about Ace Bailey. He's going to be just fine. Is he perfect? No, that's the point that I'm making. He's a young kid working on his game, but the baseline talent, size combination, athleticism combination that he has is scary stuff. And so if you want to be a part of that crowd where you're nitpicking every little thing with this kid, then I think you've got to question yourself and question the frame and the lens that you're looking at these kids through, because it's way too early for any of that.
And guys get better in the year, like as they get acclimated and adjusted. I spoke to a scout who had him at 1 still, like, or now, like, so there are believers around the league for sure. As there should be. It's very talented.
Yeah.
What's that? All right.
There's that.
Also, you know what? Before we go, I do want to say there's still room on the John Mobley Jr. Express. That's my last parting words. Okay. There's still room on the bandwagon. He's hit 19 threes already this season. I think he is legitimately like the best shooting prospect to come in college basketball in like a very long time. He's absurd.
I just want to remind our listeners, Corey and I stood with him on the floor and watched him hit 1 million threes in a row. Like, no bullshit. Like, he literally was just, it looked like someone created an AI machine that would just like never miss his threes. Was the John Mobley experience for us in person. So
yeah, like I know that they're in a light part of their schedule or whatever. I think they play Pittsburgh soon. He also lit up Texas in his first game. This kid is the goods. Get on board is all I'm saying. Just quick little parting words. He's been my favorite guy to watch this year outside of, I think, Yegor. So, all right, Albert, great episode, great questions. Glad we got to break down the guys that I got to see in person. Looking forward to doing more of these kind of episodes throughout the season when you're seeing guys at UCLA, and likewise me out on the East Coast. So that'll do it for us. Make sure that you like, subscribe, rate, review, depending on whatever platform you're on, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening on your podcast feed, all that good stuff really helps us out. Got a lot of good stuff coming down the pipeline. We're in full swing now. The season's on at No Ceilings, 5 days a week on the site, sometimes more. So lock in, come to it with your boys. Appreciate all the support as always. Everyone enjoy their Thanksgiving and, be appreciative for all that we have. So until next time, we are out, y'all.